Mike's on Mike, a conversation about politics, government, and Jacksonville. With 50-year opinion leaders Mike Hightower, Mike Tolbert, and award-winning broadcaster and longtime political observer, Mike Miller.
Welcome to another episode of Mike's on Mike. I'm Mike Miller. Mike Hightower and Mike Tolbert are both at their respective remote studios, but we're delighted to have you with us, and thank you very, very much for joining us. Our guest today is Bruce Barcelo. Bruce is a well-regarded and successful public opinion researcher. We call it a political pollster here in Jacksonville and throughout the state of Florida. In his long career, he's worked with candidates like John Delaney, former Congresswoman Tilly Fowler, and former Mayor Ed Austin. What most folks don't know, however, about Bruce is that he's been involved in successful referenda campaigns all over Florida that have generated more than $25 billion, that's with a B, for education and infrastructure, like the Better Jacksonville plan. But that's not why he's here today. In February of 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine, a conflict that's been waged now for over 3 years. For Bruce, that brutal invasion is personal. For a dozen years before Russia invaded, Bruce and his partner Tom Nolan worked in Ukraine and other former republics, helping them to have fair and transparent elections and supporting pro-Western democracies as their countries transitioned to a democracy from their former Soviet Union dominance, if you will. I should add that in addition to Ukraine, Bruce has also worked for democracies in Afghanistan, Bulgaria, Haiti, and the Republic of Georgia. Welcome, Bruce. Nice to have you on the program, and thanks for joining us.
Good to see my friends again.
You betcha. Mr. Tolbert, kick it off for us, please.
Yeah, Bruce, it's really good to see you. Let's set the table. Go way back for me, back into the mid-'90s. You started there. You started in Ukraine as a volunteer for the International Republican Institute. So tell us about what was happening back then. Share with us how many times have you been back and forth to Ukraine and Eastern Europe in the last 30 years?
I started in 1996. I got a call. That year was a campaign year for me. 3 statewide constitutional amendments. I was hired to oppose them. We spent all year traveling around for a November election. In the meantime, I get a call from somebody in Washington. I don't do anything in Washington because I don't like the town. And they said they introduced themselves as being the international NGO, and they wanted to send me to Ukraine. So, and I said, "Where is that?" They said, "You'll have to look at the map." And I said, "Okay, when would I go?" They said, "November." I said, "That doesn't sound good," but that was when the trip was. So they explained to me what it is. They match volunteers and various political and governmental administrative with the subject matter aspirants in local areas. So they picked me and 3 other pollsters. We each had a town. My town was Kharkiv. I taught a class in 1999. They asked me back to teach the master class from the graduates of all the 4 programs. And in 2002, they made me the researcher. So I all volunteer now. But they paid for the travel. But probably I've been back and forth to Ukraine 35 times over the last 30 years. Next year will be 30 years. I spent probably a year in Ukraine. And then hundreds of focus groups and town hall meetings and so wind up knowing a lot of people.
What did you learn about those people, Bruce, in all that time? What have you learned about people from Ukraine?
They have an astonishing appreciation of the individuals in their government. You could mention a name like so-and-so who was a majority leader. They say, "Oh, he's so good to his wife. His wife has cancer and he's home every night with her." Listening to them talk about, you get them in a focus group situation, listening to them to talk about their leaders and the good and bad about it was like listening to a Boston cab driver tell you about the pitching rotation of the Red Sox. I mean, their knowledge was incredibly intimate. And they're typically a humble people and very enormously generous. Generous with their time, generous with their attention, and so forth.
It is interesting that a political pollster living here in Jacksonville, now we all know about you and everything that you've done, but advising Russian republics on how to hold free and fair elections. How did that come about? And what did you do? You kind of picking up from the volunteer where your first time they paid for your travel. And then you just said you were there 30 times. And how they pick you?
Well, they originally selected me as a volunteer back in 1996 because they didn't want a Beltway pollster. They picked one guy, Whit Ayers, out of Georgia, North Carolina, and two other around the country pollsters. I'd done some work with some national firms, and they just wanted somebody they had vetted as being competent. In 2005, we did the Orange Revolution, and then the Yushchenko forces started paying me.
Once the Soviet Union collapsed, was there a hunger for democracy? Was that what the people were crying for at that time, or was it just putting the pieces and trying to put the pieces together to see how it was going to come out? Because I'm sure it was very, very complicated when you're going from one form of government to, it's not the same as going from one party to another party. It's going from one form of government to a completely different and to many people strange form of government. What was it like in those early years? And did it eventually become organized?
Democracy, a working democracy, was to them the shining city on the hill. They wanted a European statesman, diplomat, president who was respected throughout Europe, and they also wanted him to be strong enough to be the last good czar. It's typical of post-Soviet, post-Russian cultures in rehab that they look for automatic strength, along with a lot of input from citizens. So as everything started privatizing in the 90s, there was the rise of oligarchs who were powerful people in their own right, and they simply took mining concessions and took various industries and privatized them, paying pennies on the dollar. So it was, and Ukrainian people were very disappointed about that. In fact, 2005, Dr. Yushchenko, the reform candidate, had a rallying cry, bandits to prison, which was succinct and struck a responsive chord. I didn't come up with that. I don't think I would have said that. But so anyway, that's the feeling among the populace was so pervasive that if you said bandits to prison, you started getting applause.
Even though Ukraine was free from the Soviet Union, the Soviet Union, it was sitting next door to Russia, still sits next door to Russia. When you were over there working to try to promote democracy, did you ever feel spied upon or people watching what you did or not do?
In any kind of electronic communication, anything over the phone, anything in a popular place to which we usually went, there were no proper names. Everybody had a code name. A handle. Everybody had a handle. You know, no tolerant. I'm not going to tell you what my handle is. Oh. See, the reason this works is you don't tell anybody. But we never referred to the president. We never referred to the first lady. We never referred to the residents or office. You just use other words.
What was the American president's handle?
I'm not going to tell you. I will say that I think it might have changed recently.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I could be a smart ass and say, I hope you didn't do your communications on Signal, but I won't do that.
Oh, come on, guys.
Actually, we did use our communications on Signal for the last 3 years. I think if that platform is good enough for the Israeli Defense Forces, I can probably get away with it. What you don't do is invite somebody into your chat.
Yeah.
Well, it's true. Bruce, if you were spied upon, I mean, when you wanted to have a conversation with someone, did you have to just like go out in a public park and have like they do in the movies? Kind of like?
Sometimes. We had a lot of meetings in new restaurants we were trying. because they didn't know we were going there. I'll tell you a quick story. In Odessa, 2010, we're watching the Russians steal the election for mayor of Odessa. There are only 4 good jobs in Ukraine to have. You either want to be the president, the prime minister, the mayor of Kyiv, or the mayor of Odessa. If in any of those 4 jobs, you can fund anything you want to fund. If a mayor of Odessa, that's a huge, huge seaport. If he wants to build something, he calls his buddies and $100 million appears. That's it. So, and it's on the Black Sea coast, and the Empress created the Potemkin village down there, and they literally everything you do is choreographed to the point that we were heading to we were in an office. We decided where we were going to go to lunch. We got in a cab, changed our minds in the cab. And the fellow who had been tailing us for 3 days turned his cab around and followed us to the new place. But we were caught in traffic. He got there ahead of us. So now we're at the restaurant on the Black Sea, and we go inside to the waiter and say, this guy out there in a cab that slouched down, send him some food. So we bought him lunch while he was sitting there. Another one in Georgia. I was there for about 5 months, and I was followed every day from my apartment to the office. And the uniformed policeman, after the election, I was on national TV news. And after the election, the next morning, I walked out, and he was standing right there, and he waved at me and grinned. They have a 99% conviction rate in Georgia.
Oh,
best to stay perky.
You were the senior strategic advisor and helped create the revolution. Okay. One,
my people from Mayport is what we're good at.
Tell us about the Orange Revolution. What was that about? How did it change Ukraine? And did it have anything to do with you eventually going to there and work in 2010? Now, all these numbers, so you're going to have to kind of put us in context. And I guess my question is, who was running the country during the Orange Revolution beside you?
You have a gag reflex that you look for as a pollster. Are the people so desperately, virulently unhappy that they're willing just to bite down hard and not let go? That was the situation in Ukraine in 2004 or 5. They were going to vote for anybody who made sense. Now, Yushchenko had been, when the ruble fell and the Soviet Union fell apart, had been the director of the National Bank. And everybody was concerned about their pensions, their welfare payments, all that. So he simply, there's never been a check written into Ukraine. He devised a system where all of a sudden in their bank accounts, every month or every 2 weeks or whatever the cycle was, the money appeared. They wire transferred the money directly into the accounts. Phenomenal. Well, they thought this guy can get stuff done. So he was already kind of a national folk hero, and then very much a Ukrainian patriot. But he predicted that all this war was going to happen. I won't tell you the construct because I don't know how long we're going. Let me tell you something he has said to me recently. Over the last 350 years, Russia has made war on Ukraine 24 times.
wow.
They have made war on Russia. Think about the neighborhood you're in. They have made war on you every 15 years for 3.5 centuries. It's a habit. And when somebody says, well, we'll work out a ceasefire, do I get another 15 years now? That's their position. I'm not advocating this position. Just in the 20th century, Ukraine has declared its independence 6 times in this past century. and has lost it 5 times to Russia. Now, why? First of all, it's a habit. Secondly, it's good to keep the peasants in line, because if you're battling Nazi aggressors like the Ukrainian farmers, for goodness sake, we got to do our patriotic duty. Third, they can't handle the economic and freedom competition of a next-door neighbor that's really successful. While their people, they have no commercial goods industry. The gross national product of Russia today, if you can drill for it, distill it, or use it to make a weapon, they build it. Everything else you order from Japan. They don't have any consumer culture. But adding to the paranoia that is uniquely Russian, not Slavic, Russian, they're worried about the Baltic, they're worried about China, they're worried about Chechnya, they're worried about Georgia, and now they're worried about NATO. All the world is threatening them. It's a huge country. Chico once said to me, it's like a balloon. It's got big borders, and there's nothing in it inside. There are huge amounts of unpopulated territory. And China is the big one on the block. So, those are the reasons Russia invaded. Plus, there was the Biden factor. I say this delicately. From an opportunist like Putin, he wasn't dealing with Joe Biden. He was dealing with Tony Blinken and Jake Sullivan, which is kind of a boys' choir to him. So he couldn't not make war. Now we're left with the detritus of that.
Well, of all the times where Russia has gone to war against Ukraine, as you point out, every 15 years, what was it about this latest war that got the United States so involved? Because we really weren't. We weren't even that involved with Crimea, and that was back in, 14?
Well, that was Obama.
And that was Obama, I understand. But, as a nation...
Send them blankets and MREs.
All right, okay. But
wouldn't fly them in. Had to send them into Poland, and then they trucked them in.
Got it.
That's a vibrant response.
But what made this so different from all the other times
on television.
Russia and Ukraine have been
on television?
Television?
Yeah. Say this again, I hope delicately. You had at that point 3 years ago, you had a vacuum in terms of the image, the vibrancy of an image in the White House. You had a vibrant little guy who was sticking up for his country.
Zelensky?
Yeah, Zelensky. So, heck, I think he started as the hero.
I've got to ask this question. You said about every 15 years, Russia declares war on Ukraine. Mm-hmm. Shows what I don't know. I've always heard Ukraine is the breadbasket of the world, or that part of the country. Is that the reason they invaded Ukraine?
They invaded Ukraine because I'll give you my interpretation.
Yeah.
They have to make war on Ukraine because Ukraine is successful in doing stuff that's good for people. But Russia's model is not that. Russia's model is drill for it, distill it, or make it into a weapon.
In doing all this, watching elections over there, did you run into irregularities often or from time to time? And if you do, what kind?
They have made significant strides. The election, which I watched for mayor of Odessa in 2010, was which they won. They stole, by the way, successfully. They had counterfeit ballots printed at a printing house down the street that we didn't find until 2 weeks after the election. Paper ballots. It was paper ballots back then. And these tall, lucite boxes about the size of a refrigerator, the girth of a refrigerator, with a lucite clear slot in the top. You mark your ballot in the booth, you take it and put it in the slot, and everybody watches the clear vote receptacle all day long. It's gotten better. The Georgians had a funny one in 2012. They, in a country of 5 or 6 million people, the Ministry of Interior was found to have about 800,000 fake identities in its storage room, many of whom had voted. Oh, and by the way, in the Republic of Georgia, prisoners in prison are allowed to vote. The ruling party tends to win that election a lot.
There seems to be a reputation for Ukraine of being corrupt among some people in the U.S. Do you believe it's corrupt? Have you seen any corruption over there, or what's the extent of that corruption, if there is some corruption?
I would like to be there when some Washington politician calls any other country on the planet corrupt. The daily news in America is a master class in organized corruption. Is there corruption? Sure there is. Let me tell you how it works. The great promise of socialism was communism. We'll give you free health care, free education. You got your free health care, but you have to bribe the doctor to see you. Free hospital, but you got to pay for drugs, bed linens, care. Free education, you have to bribe the principal. And then when you get your child to class, you have to bribe the teacher. That's what the promise of communism left these people with. They have a cultural heritage over the last 120 years of having to bribe their way through their daily lives.
So it's just a pay-to-play culture then?
Yeah, it's a pay-to-survive culture.
Oh, that's even more brutal.
We're friends. We've been out together. Would you think of having lunch in a restaurant and not leaving a tip? No.
Yeah.
They wouldn't think anything of that. They would be horrified at the notion they would leave a doctor's office without giving him something for his children. So they're aware of it. I don't think it's. I think it's a lot better than it was. People aren't stealing whole industries or killing off their opposition now. I think that's arguably better.
Bruce, you mentioned oligarchs a little bit ago, people taking over businesses without paying. There's a belief right now that in the U.S. we're kind of heading toward an oligarchy. Do you see any similarities about what happened over in Ukraine or in Russia that is happening in United States?
Let me take your question and turn it 5 degrees and answer it that way. In common usage, oligarch refers to somebody who has stolen a basic industry, stolen it from property of the government. I don't see anything like that happening here. But if you take oligarch as meaning clusters of inordinate influence and power, I think that's shifting daily. You know, do I think the legacy media is as strong as it was 25 years ago? Not a chance. Do I think insurance companies are as strong as they were 20 years ago? No, I think they're coming up under a lot of scrutiny. You see ups and downs every day in the relative influence. And even political parties, the one thing the safest thing we have is a vibrant two-party system, as long as one of them is vibrant. Some people on the other side of the aisle, I'm not sure about vibrancy. But if you're arguing over policy and positions and so forth, that's one thing. But if you let a party get 75% of the vote, then the party's going to get out of hand 100% of the time. And the voters will correct you. I think that's what happened in last November.
And it seems that a lot of Americans who once embraced the Ukrainian cause are following Trump's lead now. 2 years ago, the people called him the leader of the free world. Have things really changed that much? And do you see him as a dictator? How do you see Zelensky now?
I don't know Zelensky personally. The word dictator is enjoying a moment of celebrity. Democrats think that Trump is a dictator. Republicans think that federal district judges are dictators. Everybody seems to think Musk is a dictator. Pretty much agree on Putin and Little Rocket Guy and China and Maduro. But, I mean, everybody's a dictator. I think people in campaigns, particularly after they've won a couple, play fast and loose with I mean, my goodness, Donald Trump is I happen to support him on most issues, but he's talking about a third presidential term. And then nobody's done that since FDR, and that didn't work out well. So, again, I support him on
Do you
that.
think Zelensky's a dictator?
No.
Okay.
I
missed that.
His partition was ratified by a bipartisan or multi-partisan vote in the RADA, the National Assembly. No, they're under martial law right now. You can't have an election under martial law.
How long is his term of office?
Till they have another election.
Till they have another election right now.
Yeah, okay. Because they have martial law, it sets.
Yeah.
They're having a battle inside their country by foreign troops. You can't run a reasonably civilized election under those terms. And enough consensus was in the National Assembly that they said, we're not doing that right now. And a lot of them don't like Zelensky. I understand that. I don't know whether I like him or not. I do know when we offered him a plane ride out, he said, I need ammunition, not a ride. Oh, that was pretty cool.
It was pretty cool. Guys, we were running out of time here, but hold on, everybody, and I'll tell you why. We're going to do a second show with Bruce because there is so much to talk about. And he has consented to stay for a second program. So this is the first half of a 2-part series. Gee, we're becoming like the Tributary guys. Now we have multi-part series here. And Bruce will be joining us for next week's program as well. So we hope you'll join us. Thank you all for joining us. We appreciate you being here. We appreciate the Jacksonville History Center for their sponsorship of Mike's on Mike, along with their fine staff and particularly the fine donors who keep the lights on and the cameras rolling. We'll see you all again next week with Bruce Barcelo. Have a good week, everyone.
Mike's on Mike with Mike Tolbert, Mike Hightower, and Mike Miller can be found on your favorite podcasting platform, Facebook, and YouTube. Visit the website at mikesonmike.com. Join us next time for more conversation with Mike's on Mike.